Hey guys, welcome back to Sprague Homestead on another Mailbag Monday. I'm Nikki, and here is your question of the week. So our question this week is, can you influence the gender of your offspring by feeding something different with your rabbits? So basically what this person is wanting to do is control the offspring being produced by their animals to kind of reflect where the market's at. So if he's getting a lot of requests for females, try to produce more does. If he's got more demand for males, produce more bucks. This is a really interesting question. It comes up a lot, and not just in rabbits, but in multiple species. We see this a lot, particularly in poultry. There's not a lot of money in roosters, of course, and in males in general. So there's always people trying to do backyard chickens and trying to get more females to hatch than males. Now, when it comes to chickens, you'll hear all kinds of crazy stuff like, oh, pointy eggs and round eggs, and egg size doesn't have anything to do with it. Shape doesn't have anything to do with it. But you can actually influence poultry by temperature. Most incubators that are used privately are not calibrated so closely that it's very effective. I mean, we're talking like half a degree of temperature to make a difference. But you can actually change your gender of your poultry. What's interesting about this is, like I said, it involves temperature. So that doesn't work in mammals. So when we talk about things like rabbits, cows, goats, and the rest of it, the question becomes, can you influence the gender of your offspring? And the answer is not exactly. There are no studies that have been done on rabbits and cavies. By and large, the only things I could find, and I did a lot of research on this over the last week to come up with an answer, the only things that have been really studied is mice, hamsters, and they did some studies on things like red deer, wild mountain goats, and dairy cattle. So none of those actually fit the true system and herbivore nature of a rabbit. So I don't believe you can, and I'll kind of follow this up with my own experience and kind of explain what I've seen. So to kind of give you some ideas, like I said, I found some studies. They did find that in mice and in hamsters, you can influence based on fats and carbohydrates. And it was different for both species. So mice had a whole different requirement than what hamsters did. So this is, again, why I say rabbits, I don't think so. Now, interestingly enough, in like I was saying, red deer, I think they looked at elk, it was bighorn sheep, mountain goats, and something else. Now, you can, in fact, if the animals are in prime breeding condition, so optimal weight and condition when they go into the breeding season, and are able to keep that prime feeding and optimal feeding, they will actually produce more males than females. Now remember, most of the time these guys are only dropping a singleton or twins. You don't get very big sets of offspring. Like mountain goats don't usually produce the 3, 4, 5, and 6 that we'll sometimes see in domestic goats. That's a whole different thing. And as far as I could find, domestic goats have not been studied. Now, in dairy cows, a similar thing happens where a prime condition female fed a prime condition diet will produce more bulls than cows, but only if she's a seasoned cow. So I thought this was interesting that heifers, a maiden first-time mother, will not be influenced in this way. So they don't know why. They're still doing studies, but I thought that was really interesting. And the reason that's a big deal is because in the dairy industry, of course, we are trying to breed more cows and less bulls. So if a dairy farm can figure out how to control that, there are less bulls being produced that head to meat market. And why that's a big deal, because, you know, as long as they're getting used, it's not a waste. But at the same time, dairy bulls in particular are not real good for meat. They don't muscle like our beef breeds. But getting back to rabbits. So I did find some folks, some different breeders who have done some studies of their own trying to use the hamster and the mice as their kind of go-to, and nobody could influence the offspring. Now, what I'm going to say about this is I have had seasons where all of my offspring, or predominantly all of my offspring, were female, and all of my offspring predominantly were males. And let me explain when that happens. So, and this kind of made me think of, at first I looked at it and I thought this is bubkiss, and then I remembered, I just went to a show with a girlfriend, and she's got the same thing happening. In fact, 2 girlfriends of mine that are breeders, one does satins, one's doing silver fox, and I've had it happen in both Americans and Harlequins. So here's what we found. We found that we are more likely in the late summer to early spring to produce litters that are more predominantly male. These are usually born in later parts of the fall. But the reason we think this happens is because we take our females off of litters through the summer because we're very hot where we are. So they hold a little bit more flesh condition, aka a little bit fatter than I normally keep my rabbits. Through the summer months, the bagged feed that you get in the fall especially tends to be pretty darn fresh. It's coming off of freshly grown stuff. So going back to this idea of what they were saying about, red deer and the rest of it, if they're fed a prime diet and they're in prime condition, they're more likely to produce males. This is what I have seen too. I am more likely to get a predominantly male litter at these certain times of the year when my females are in the best of condition and they're fed a more optimal diet. Now, in the spring, like towards the later part of the spring, before you start seeing hay get cut, they are using forage to make those rabbit pellets from the end of the last year, okay? And grass hay gets worse as it goes. It's a little bit different in alfalfa. So if you're an alfalfa-based rabbit pellet, you're going to see different results. I feed a rabbit pellet that is predominantly Timothy-based. So by the last cutting, the grass hay is not the highest quality that it was at the beginning of the year, okay? So what we've seen is, usually by the time I get to late spring, my does have already had 1-2 litters. So they're not holding as good of condition. We always make sure that they're at weight and they look pretty good, but they're not holding the fat stores that they did back in the fall when we first started breeding after the summer. That hay is coming in and it's slightly degraded, right? Because it sat longer. So though they tell you on the tags that feed is feed is feed and they test, I don't know how often they test. I don't know how true that is, but I can tell you that I have had more luck later in the spring with heavy doe litters. Like, I have to be very careful over-promising people in the spring that are looking for bucks, because it almost always works out that all of my best animals in the spring are going to be does. Don't know why that is. Is there a feed correlation? It could be, because we do get more litters of does in the spring, or doe heavy. Right now, a girlfriend of mine has a litter of 7 that is all bucks. So go figure that. So there you go. That's kind of the answer to that. Is there a correlation? There is no study. Can you influence it? I would not even begin to know what minerals. I'm assuming it's a mineral, a vitamin, a fiber, or a carbohydrate. You could tweak it. You could do your own studies and try to influence it. I don't know exactly what would be making that big of a difference. And it's not every litter either. Like I said, we see more doe heavy litters in the spring, but it's not every litter. We still predominantly hit that 50-50, roughly 50-50 mark of males to females in litters. So is there a way to do it? If there is, I don't know what it is. At least not in rabbits and KBs. All right, guys, that is your question of the week. Now, if you have other questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. You can always email them to me. You can send them to me on Instagram, Facebook, all that fun stuff. Don't forget, our cookbook is out. I'm sure Kanan will drop a little link because that's what he's good at. It is live on Amazon. You can buy it. There's a Kindle version. You can buy a print-on-demand paper copy. It's $25. You can also send me a check directly. This is good if you want it signed. I'm just a person, but if you want it signed, or if you have some crazy thing against Amazon, and some people do, you can directly send me a check for $25 to Nikki Manley. To get that mailing address, please send me an email at srhomestead@yahoo.com, and I'd be happy to give you that information. All right, guys, so that is it. Keep those questions coming. This one was a fun one, and I got to admit, I had to do a little research, but I'm happy to do that. So send those questions over, and we will see you next time. Happy homesteading.